Greetings, this is Chris Hislop from the Montana World Affairs Council, and this is GPS, Global Perspectives on Security, our international affairs webcast that dives a little bit deeper into the international security issues of the day. We're joined by our friend and partner, Mick Mulroy. Mick is the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, a retired CIA paramilitary operations officer, and United States Marine. He's a national security analyst and a co-founder of the Lobo Institute here in Whitefish, Montana. He's also a board member of the Plato Institute in Athens, Greece. Mick, good to see you again. How have you been?
Good to see you, Chris. I've been busy talking about all this, but all good.
Yeah, well, I encourage anybody who's watching this to see Mick on ABC News and any number of other media sources where Mick shares his expertise. And Mick is here with us today. We are again talking about Ukraine. Mick, gains made by the Ukrainian military in the East. It's early days. They're not huge gains, but I'm wondering if you can help us make sense of what this actually means.
Sure, Chris. So if you say the first phase of the war was basically, from the Ukrainian perspective, survive. Second phase was hold. Third phase, which we're now in, is attack. And they have gone back on the offensive, and they're looking to make gains. They actually have already made gains in around Kherson, which is the key southern city on the coast, very close to the isthmus that leads down to the Crimean Peninsula, very significant. And they're now making gains around Kharkiv, which is the second largest city in Ukraine. And quite frankly, the second part around Kharkiv was unexpected. They will launch two offensives at the same time. But they have made some gains. They've taken some key terrain, particularly around Kherson, and they are destroying and depleting the Russians' ability to resupply themselves in that key city. So right now, the momentum is on the side of the Ukrainians.
Mick, for so long, the layperson gets this story of, a very large scale Russian military offensive, almost impossible to halt and to turn back, yet we're seeing these. But what may have changed on the Russian side that would allow for this kind of retaking of ground by the Ukrainians?
So there's several factors, I would say. The first is the amount of support that the United States and NATO countries are providing to the Ukrainians and the type of support. So you're seeing these HIMARS, you'll hear that a lot on the news. They're a high mobility rocket and artillery system. It essentially allows Ukrainians to target Russian artillery out of the range of Russian artillery, which is, obviously very significant, but it's really precise. I've actually seen them in combat be used, and they're very precise. So the weapon systems they have, obviously the fighting force of the Ukrainians combined has created a scenario where the Russians are losing in head-to-head battles. Also, the Russians are being depleted in their troops. They've got about 70 to 80,000 casualties already. If you think about that, it's astonishing. They're having a hard time recruiting. They're basically just forcing people into soldiers. There's been reports of them going to mines, like coal mines, for example, and just taking everybody in the mine and making them a soldier. If that gives you an indication of how desperate they are. They're also buying back weapons and munitions from the North Koreans that they sold to the North Koreans 10 years ago. So the Russians are seeing significant shortfalls on troops, on weapons, and ammunition. All the three things you got to have to win a fight. And the Ukrainians are seeing significant support from the U.S. and NATO, which combined with their willingness to fight has shown that it's given them the initiative.
So the initiative is on, the momentum is theirs, but we'll return to a point that you and I talked about a few months ago, which was what would happen if Russia started to lose the battles and this war. At that time, there was some talk of the use of technical nuclear weapons to, as they say, escalate to de-escalate. We are now seeing a scenario whereby, Russia is clearly being turned back in certain areas. Going beyond the kind of battlefield space now, Mick, into the geopolitical arena, what might this mean for Russia and President Putin going ahead?
So that phrase, you're correct. They like to use that escalate to de-escalate. But I would caution, not that they're listening to Mick Mulroy from Montana, over in the Kremlin. But I would caution that that's not the way the world's going to view this, right? So if they, and under their doctrine, a battlefield commander can actually decide to use a tactical nuclear weapons. None of our generals can ever make a decision about the use of any nuclear weapons. It comes from the President of the United States. But they say that a lot, which is cause for concern. Because if a tactical operational commander decides that they're losing, say, Kherson, they technically, under their doctrine, which doesn't make it legal, of course, but they could use a tactical nuclear weapon under this idea to escalate, to de-escalate. But it would not do that. It would basically, I think, bring in NATO into this war, which would make it a third world war. I don't know where we go from there, but I think it's been clear that the U.S. and NATO has made it clear to Russia that this will be unacceptable use of force. There's also a concern that in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, that Russia is essentially using that as a giant, what we call dirty bomb, right? So if it were to completely melt down, which it's come close to because of the power being cut to the reactors, it would spread radiation throughout Europe and Russia, but certainly throughout Germany, France, and most of the countries in Europe. So there's a concern that Vladimir Putin is also using that potential catastrophe for his own benefit as some kind of nuclear dirty bomb threat.
Well, again, dark days in Ukraine, as it's been since February. Not that any of this is good news, but Mick, thank you so much for helping us make sense of the things that we read in the headlines and listen to on the news. Mick Mulroy from the Lobo Institute, our friend and partner. Check them out. Here is their website. And I'd like to give a special thanks to the sponsors of our webcast, the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Stockman Bank, and Allegiance. They help us bring this and many more programs to you in Montana, across the United States, and around the world. Mick Mulroy from the Lobo Institute, thank you once again. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chris.